People had told me before, and I heard this sort of saying that Reddit was where a lot of video games, as of recent, certainly got kind of muddied up. Right? So I didn't know that really until certainly recently when I just sat and watched video games just be obliterated by way of this website. So I now for sure have the position that Reddit is where video games go to die, especially semi popular ones. The big experience, recent experience, we saw that with Marvel's Avengers. I had been documenting that even before the beta even was done with, and before the final game came out. And you sat here and read all of these comments, or I did, and we went through them. You can go look at my videos on my main page, YoungWorld59, and we talk about how wow these guys have no idea what it is that they're talking about, and they're going to obliterate this game. And a lot of them were like not even comic book normies, like in Marvel Cinematic Universe normies. We have another example of that, and the latest example of that. I've got all my dogs here, all my hat and whatnot. Latest example of that, Outriders. And Outriders, what I appreciated about the game, or appreciate about the game, is how difficult it actually is. Certainly towards the end game, it's not one of those games that you can just sit up there and just breeze through. For the most part, it gets harder at more people as you add to your fire team. These are concepts that I appreciate from a game, particularly like that. And lo and behold, they rolled out the first big patch, and the first big patch was dealing with a lot of balance issues that was necessary. It was necessary to adjust those balance issues instead of just leaving them as is. That way, people can of course, you want people to be able to make whatever builds according to their play style. That's what the love of the RPG. But the base, like sort of classes, had some balance issues. They did what they needed to do to correct those, as well as going through some of those exploits where people were able to repeat missions to get legendaries. Funny enough, they didn't even punish people for that. They just got rid of the exploit. And of course, instead of, and this is by, yes, we know Outriders had all these service issues and all this other stuff. And I'm sitting here going to Reddit. I went to Reddit, and it's the same thing that we saw with, again, I told you, Avengers, another game, where a bunch of people are griping about difficulty, man. And it's like, God forbid there is a nerf to either a build or not, or a class or a buff to an enemy or something of that nature, which effectively those are the same thing. That seems to be what I see a lot. And it's that for whatever reason, if the game isn't specifically like known for that, and then even with that, even with like Demon Souls, I talked about the normies with that game. Not even, of course, a weirdo Kotaku writers and whatnot crying that there wasn't a difficulty change option or something like that. Don't nobody ask for that, just them maybe, I guess. But it's a similar thing where I'm sitting here watching these guys just destroy a game. And what it does, it leads me to believe that, well, I think this is the clear and obvious thing. Reddit is it's a certain type of demographic. Simple as that. It's a certain type of demographic. It's not the same across the board. It's not one of those things that it can be completely representative of your fan base. That may be an interactive bunch, but that doesn't mean that that's like most people use Reddit that are playing your game or something like that. Unfortunately, a lot of games get a lot of their data and information from the Reddits of the world. Despite that being where, as I'm saying, that's where games go to die. The most common thing is like, God forbid that the user has to struggle in any way, shape, or form, has to think about definitely something in an online setting, which is why a lot of those things exist, because the game is always online for a reason. And a lot, no matter if you want to just play solo, it's supposed to be built. The game and your character that you create is built in this concept where he exists alongside a bunch of these outriders. So no matter if you are struggling or whatever, doesn't mean that another person, is. And I'm sitting here watching people go, oh man, I just wish you would have had buffs, and he's got all these upvotes and all of this sort of stuff. And I'm sitting here like, one of the things I appreciated from the game was the fact that it wasn't easy. Me and Napa were struggling. We spent 25 minutes on the last boss, beating them. You know, those two times. For the example, with the main story on tier 14. And that's after playing it for hours because we couldn't beat it. That doesn't make me offended. God forbid that happens with the other guys, and they get, again, for balance purposes, aren't able to cheese or exploit. Oh, I would just rather you would have buffed them so we can all have it easy. It's where the games go to die, particularly in the aspect of difficulty. Reddit is where, and I don't know, I don't have the information as far as what type of person regularly uses Reddit. I'm not one of those. So I can't say what type of guy does it, but if that's who they're listening to, and that's who these games are listening to, and then I think we need to start as gamers looking to that, because you got to understand, a lot of these guys, a lot of these definitely recent developers, modern developers, are funneling like all of their information there. They put their patch notes there and everything. They're interacting. They're collecting that data based on that. So that's a type of demographic. A lot of y'all maybe watching this video don't even be on Reddit, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, how do you, as a developer or as executive of the company, decipher that information and say, okay, we got to take this. Doesn't mean the information is completely useless, but that type of demographic has this issue or that issue with the game. That doesn't mean it's representative of the entire game. And I've made this abundantly clear when it comes to gaming. Either way, just because I get this whole listen to the community thing, that's always an important thing that you hear people say, definitely talking about online games. Listen to the community. And I agree with that to an extent. But at some point, you got to draw a line and you have to say, okay, well, we know better about this in terms of the mechanics of the game than you are, because you're not a developer. Right? And what you're advocating will ruin this game in the concept design. And it'll often be all over the place if you're sitting here listening to what these people want and expect. And then next thing you know, your game's broke. Avengers. It's broke. And I'm not saying just from an unplayable standpoint. I'm talking about from a concept design. We don't even have any idea what it is that you're trying to do. Who is this game for? The Reddit normies? Maybe. Holy crap, I'm getting deja vu again, man. I'm getting it again.